Welcome to another Artist Conversation brought to you by Peaks Island Radio. On Friday, June 17th, the Peaks Island House Concert Series helps kick off Peaks Fest with a performance by the Winifred Horan Quartet at the New Bracket Church from 8 to 9:30 p.m. I had the pleasure of talking with Winifred Horan about her lifelong passion for music, her years performing with the Celtic supergroup Solas, and her recent ventures with the Winifred Horan Quartet. The conversation left me excited about the show and inspired by the power of music of all kinds to bring people together and move them. I hope you have a similar experience. Maybe a good place to start is hearing a little bit about what your experience with Peaks Island is and how you're feeling about returning to the island.
Well, I have to say the only reason I know about Peaks Island is because a very dear friend lives on Peaks, and she is responsible for this concert series, Ellen Mahoney, and her family, who I have known for quite some time now. And she has been asking me since before COVID to come up and perform, and it just didn't happen. Like I was explaining to you just earlier, COVID kind of threw a monkey wrench into a lot of musicians' plans and careers, and kind of derailed the whole industry. I had sort of stopped gigging just very briefly before COVID anyway, because I moved home to New York to take care of my mom and my dad, who were elderly. So I think my last gig before the actual shutdown was out on the West Coast in like February of 2020. And I was supposed to be going out again. So that was a successful run, but COVID, the word was out. Like we were starting to hear about this, illness, but it still didn't feel like, oh, it won't come here. That whole thing, it's very far away and all that. But literally within a week, I was supposed to be flying out again to the West Coast, and that run got canceled, like just completely shut down pretty quickly. It was amazing how fast everything just spiraled, So yeah, but I the last time I was up on Peaks, I've been up there a few times now, would have been maybe the summer of 2019, and I went out to visit the Mahonies, and I just think it's one of the most stunning places. I can very much relate to the sort of vibe and atmosphere because I grew up down here in New York on Long Island on the Atlantic Ocean. Of course, I grew up in a peninsula called Rockaway Beach, and that's where I am now. So the ocean and the sea and sailing and, walking your dogs it's all part of my DNA as well. So Peaks kind of really felt very comfortable to me. So beautiful. So I'm really looking forward to getting back up there, just for its beauty, but also to see friends, to see Ellen and her family, and really play music. Yeah, very excited to, and it's kind of special that it's my first gig back too, because Ellen and I have a very deep friendship. So it's kind of a cool thing. It's funny how the world and the universe works.
Yeah, very true. Tell me a little bit about your friendship with Ellen. So she had mentioned to me when introducing the two of us that you actually are in some ways responsible for getting her inspired to do this concert series. Do you remember back then what that was like?
I do. I do remember Ellen speaking to me about wanting to pursue some of her interests, obviously, like artistic, and I know that she had been working with the Illustration Institute, and she said her daughters were still at home. Like this was even probably pre-high school for her two daughters that were still at home, and I think maybe she was, she loves music and she loves the arts, and she's a huge supporter, and I think that she was just trying to figure out a way to bring that to her community. I mean, I know very surely that community is very important to Ellen and her family. And so I think that was sort of, and she, like, I think, she asked, like, do you think it's a good idea? Or, she kind of had it in her mind of what it was going to be. And it just sounded really organic and, yeah, community-based, grassroots sort of vibe. And it just sounded really like a great idea. And I think she probably went for it, like, maybe the following summer, if I'm not mistaken. I can't remember the timeline because COVID has kind of blurred everyone's timelines. But yeah. So honestly, I really didn't have much to do with the actual, like, heavy lifting at all of getting Ellen sort of in motion to do this. She told me about the idea. I thought it was a great idea. I said I would come up and play at some point, and then things just kind of went south for the music industry. I know Ellen's been putting on concerts now for probably close to 4 years, and then obviously had to take probably a little bit of a sabbatical like everybody else. But I'm just really delighted that it's up and running. And I know, just from what I've heard and seen, like, she has some really great artists and musicians coming through there. Making that trip out to the island is a really special place. And from the lineups and the gigs that I've seen from the past and what's coming up in the near future and, further on down the summer, just some really great musicians, from the Celtic tradition, from the bluegrass tradition, from the old timey tradition, French Canada, even, I think,
Mm-hmm.
So it's a great opportunity and a great thing for the island. I think you'd probably agree, like,
Oh,
just to have
absolutely.
it right. Yeah. To have it right there. And it's something that I think will definitely grow organically.
Yep, absolutely. And I think you're right. I think that in some ways it's a really good symbiotic relationship, both for the island to be able to have access to these great musicians. And then also, I think there is definitely something for people who have an artistic bent to come out and be on an island like this. When you're out here, or when you're even at home near the water, is that a source of inspiration? Like, does it help fill the well creatively for you?
Oh God, that's such a great question. I yes, and so yes, it depends on the day. Like, so the ocean and the beach, as islanders and people that are living that life, know it's company. Which, so during the pandemic and during the lockdown, I honestly can't think of a better place. Well, I was home and I was with my parents and I was kind of taking care of them, but the beach was like a sanctuary for me because the beach wasn't shut down. You could
Hmm.
still get out there and walk on the beach and be close to the water, and just like, for everything that we all went through, sort of our tactile relationships to the world, I guess. Like, everything became on the computer and over the phone, and, music, concerts, teaching lessons, everything, like Zoom. No one had ever heard of Zoom. Well, I hadn't heard of Zoom, so our lives, like, turned into Zoom. Our lives turned into this complete, just like, different kind of vortex, right? Like, so tactily, in a tactile way, that felt really bizarre to me and to a lot of other musicians I know. It was a great, thank goodness we had it, though, as a platform, but it in a tactile sense, because music to me is so tactile, physically, like, it's something that you can touch and physically touch, but also, like, hearing it and feeling it through the computer is never going to feel the same as hearing it and feeling it in a church or in a concert hall or in a venue, whatever the venue is, or even outside at a festival. There's just nothing that compares to that feeling. And I found myself feeling that connection, going back to your question about, like, walking on the beach and being close to the ocean, that sense of the tactile relationship to nature, but also what it does to you spiritually and, like, to your soul. It was very close. It was the closest thing I could kind of feel myself get to as regards to like my music or being creative or having that kind of a connection. And I truly think that that was one of the things that was so bizarre about the lockdowns for not just, well, musicians, yes, but artists not. And I shouldn't even say that for society in general. I just think that was the most bizarre thing about it, was that our physical, emotional, and spiritual relationship to what we're normally connected to us around us on a daily basis was so compromised or altered. It was really bizarre. And so that's why, like, I recently got to play. So I have done some playing, and I've gotten together with friends, and I've been doing some recording. And there's been some local gigs like here in the neighborhood that I've gone to. And I went into the city since like the COVID thing has lifted, lockdowns have lifted. And, obviously it's still out there, but I have gone to a few gigs, and it still feels a little, tentative, but it's getting there. And yeah, so I'm so excited to just kind of be able to feel that again and feel that connection with the players around me, which I couldn't feel on the computer. So the ensemble thing, like sitting next to each other and actually physically feeling each other's breathing and just body language and everything that goes into like playing in an ensemble, the sonic relationship, the vibrations, everything. That was such a gorgeous feeling to have again, So yeah, I hope that kind of answers your question. The beach is always going to feel like, the ocean is always going to feel like an ensemble member. I hope that doesn't sound too cheesy, but it kind of feels like, I was by myself. I was with the dogs on the beach, but the ocean was always there as like another part of my little posse.
Yep.
And my dad used to say to me, like, you'll never feel lonely. You'll never feel lonely if you have the ocean there, And I know people that have grown up and live on the water really know what that means. So yeah, exactly, it was a gift. Yeah. You know that, right? I mean, there's nothing like it.
I think a lot of people out here can relate to that for sure. So I'd heard you reference your dad and talking about the ocean and never feeling alone. So it seems from the little bit that have read up about you that your dad played a pretty big role in your music life too. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Absolutely, yeah. So Dad, I came home, Chris, about 3 years ago. I had been touring for 30 years or something. And, insane touring, like nonstop, all over the place, all over the United States, all over the world, at a very crazy pace. Something that I look back on now, and especially after the COVID lockdowns and nothing happening, it really feels like it was a roller coaster. But I say that to you because, like, I came home initially, it was before COVID, so I was still kind of touring, but not to the extent that I had been. I had been playing with a band called Solas for 25 years, and we had toured extensively. And that band took a sabbatical back in 2017, so I started playing with a couple of people. Utsaf Lal on piano, who's actually coming with me for the Peaks Island show next week on the 17th of June. Anyway, back to Dad. So yeah, Dad was a very talented man. Kind of like, I think he passed away. Actually, he lived for a year after I came home. I took care of him for a year. He had leukemia, cancer, and he passed back in September of 2020, and it was cathartic in many ways. So many ways that we don't even have time to go into it. But like his influence on me musically, he's probably my biggest influence because of his direction. As a young father, he was a musician himself. He was also a wooden boat builder, a carpenter, master carpenter, very well read, just kind of like a bit of a Renaissance man. But he was a fantastic musician, a jazz trumpet player. He played piano. When he was younger, he had gotten like a full scholarship to attend like the Royal Academy in London for classical piano, and he turned that down. Something else came up. I don't know. He ran away with like a jazz band, and like the life of a young sort of like, rebellious musician, which I definitely emulated. So anyway, but as a young girl, he knew, and I'm very grateful to him for this now as I get older, for really giving his kids everything music. Like we had piano lessons, we had violin lessons, we had dance, our arts, the creative side of life. We had dance lessons. He made us read poetry. We went to regular school, but I almost felt like at the same time I was going to regular school, I was also being homeschooled by him in some like amazing, crazy way. But yeah, he got me playing piano when I was a little girl, about 5, 6 years old. He was my first teacher. And basically he wanted us to have everything, and music was really important to him. I think he thought that like if a young child learns music, they have a way better chance at learning so much more and having access to so much more. Like it helps your memory, it helps your your brain development. Anyway, that's one side of it. The other side of it was that he was also quite artistic himself, and it was important to him that we had that. And it was also he wanted us to be very aware of our cultural roots. So we here, growing up in New York, which was like, and still is, obviously, like hotbed of culture. But back when I was growing up as a kid, it was a very like immigrant, pockets of immigrant cultures, Now it's all beautifully kind of woven together. But back then, like when my parents emigrated over from Ireland in the late 50s, the Irish emigrated to Rockaway, Queens, or the Bronx in New York, and the Italians went to parts of Queens and parts of Brooklyn, and the Polish people settled in parts of Queens and Brooklyn, different neighborhoods. And that's just how it was. And so we were surrounded by Irish immigrants and Italian immigrants. But like Dad really felt like he became more connected to his Irish culture when he emigrated to New York, which is really crazy to think about, but not so much, because that happens, I think, like immigrants, when they get to a new land or a new place, I think they long for home, or they miss home. Back then anyway, before the advent of the internet, and they long for their homeland so much that they make sure that their culture is still thriving in their everyday lives. It was really Dad's hand in making sure that his kids were connected not only to the arts, but to their culture, where they came from. Mm-hmm. So yeah.
Do you remember when it happened for you that you thought that this wasn't just going to be part of like what you did as part of your day-to-day life, but as something that you wanted to pursue professionally?
That's funny. I think it was when I got my SAT results back in high school. I'm half joking, but I'm kind of not. Like I always knew since I was a little girl that I loved playing music. It felt the most comfortable to me. I don't know. It felt like a safe place, or it felt like a very safe place. And I was also good at it. And I was the kind of kid that I liked when I was good at something, like most kids, right? So yeah, I always knew that I wanted to be a musician or a dancer. Like there was a long time that I felt like, oh, I'll be a ballerina when I grow up. Like a lot of young girls, I'd love to be a ballerina. Or young men now these days can say I want to be a ballet dancer. But I think when the penny really dropped for me was when I was a teenager, and getting ready to take the SATs. Where do you want to go to college? Because that was another thing. My father was like, everyone's going to college. Even though he couldn't afford to send us all to college, he worked his butt off to make sure that we all got to go to college. That was a no. That was no discussions. Like everyone was going to college. And when I took the SATs in high school, I was like, what am I going to do? I was good in English. Also because of Dad, because he was like making us read poetry and read so many books at home, and I loved that. But I was like, you know what? I don't need to take the SATs, or I don't need to actually prepare for the SATs, because I'm gonna be a musician. I'm gonna go to like a conservatory somewhere, because I was already as a teenager, I was already like enrolled in a music school down here in New York, like a prep school called the Mannes School of Music. Obviously, schooling and education was very important to my father. And he keeps coming back into the story because honestly, his hand was involved in all of this. It was like, even though they were struggling financially, anytime there was word of like an audition for a scholarship, or can we get like funding, or, a grant or this or that, Dad was on it, And so that's that was in the back of my head. It was like, well, I'm kind of good at this and I love it so much. And I don't want to go to normal college because I don't want to be normal. Like I want to be an artist. Yeah. So that was kind of it. It was like maybe my sophomore year in high school. I was like, I'd love to do this like for my life and like be this. This is how I want to, I didn't think make my living, but this is what I want to be.
Can you like think back to then and think about, as the graduation's approaching, how you felt? Like, what did you think? Like, were you like, oh God, what's next? How did you find a way?
Yeah, big time. And most conservatory students do, or most like art or design or photography or painting students, or ballet dancers, or any student that is coming out of a creative institution has a moment before they actually know that they're going to be leaving the institution, or what we termed it as like the safety bubble of the institution. Because while you're in that safety bubble, like you're playing in orchestra every day, you're playing string quartets every day, you're going to sight singing class, you're in opera orchestra, you're like just completely immersed in it. And you don't really have time. I mean, it feels like, oh my God, this is so fulfilling, and this is so busy, and there's so much to work on and so much to learn. Like, you don't even ever think about being ready to actually go out there and do it. I mean, I think, well, I shouldn't say that. There were certain students that probably had a higher confidence level. It was a very competitive environment. I also remember. So honestly, there was really no time to think about, again, it was like being in high school. Maybe it happened, or that penny dropped maybe for me at the conservatory, maybe my junior year, where I was like, oh wow, I only have one more year here, and then I'm going to have to go out and like audition for orchestras, and, because I was going for a performance major, which is so ridiculous because it just is. I mean, it doesn't, I just don't, I can kind of shoot ahead 35, 40 years. I was hired back at that same conservatory to be on faculty, and seeing the students as young students, and me being on the other side of the table or the other side of the classroom, part of me felt really like I was questioning my ethics about being, trying to be an inspiration to them to go out there and do this when I had been at it for 35, 40 years at this stage and knew how extremely challenging and difficult it was to actually make a living or be able to sustain a life as a musician, some sort of life. And I mean, I'm not going to lie to you. In the beginning, like I was waitressing, I was working in like a photography studio, and I was doing string quartets on the side. And, you kind of cobble together, you kind of actually do anything you have to do to be able to do your music. So you graduate, I know, I'd say 90% of my graduating class, maybe 85% or something like that. When we graduated, half of us were waitressing or, just trying to make ends meet, but still really working hard on our music and like doing auditions. And, there's sort of like a limbo period that exists. And it's, for some people, it exists for the rest of their lives. I realized very soon after I got out of the conservatory, after a few auditions for like classical ensembles, that I didn't have the nerves of steel that you actually need to go through those audition process. Like it was, again, insanely competitive. And so, I got into a few like small orchestras. One or two I was going to take, and I didn't. I don't know, something in my gut just said this didn't feel right. And I said, let me just kind of knock around for a little bit longer and see if I can do some more freelancing. And I ended up moving back to New York City, and I got involved in like the scene down there. And again, I was waitressing for a couple of years and doing what people do, and fell back into like the roots folk music scene that I kind of grew up with. And I'm not going to say it happened overnight. It didn't. But then like I met other musicians, and that's kind of like the long and short of it, is that's when the idea of Solas was kind of born. 5 of us living in New York City at the time, all doing different freelance things and in different bands, and, understanding and realizing how good these musicians were in our immediate, area around us. And we were just like, we should start a band. And that's really how it happened. And I can't say I know that that's not how it happens for everybody, but it's how it happened for us. And then we literally worked our butts off for 25 years on the road. We recorded like 12 or 13 albums, and we said yes to everything, and we lived out of suitcases and really lived the lives of musicians, of working musicians. And it was amazing, and it was frightening, and it was not stable. But then there were really good years where we're like, oh my God, we're actually making some money. This is great. Like, this is okay, And it never felt like work, which is also sounding very idealistic and romantic, but it didn't. The work part of it was like getting on the airplanes and getting in the bus and driving 10 hours to do like a 2-hour show. And, everyone thinks it's like, oh God, you're so lucky. You have the life. You guys have the life. And we did, and I would never change it. I would never change it in a million years. I would do this. I would do it all over again. But yeah, so that's that. And then, but I wanted to go back to that, the idea of me questioning my kind of ethics when I went back to the conservatory, knowing like how difficult it was and is. And especially now, especially now after COVID, to see the industry, the music industry and the arts industry so decimated, really, and just, knocked flat and trying to recover. It was already a pretty precarious situation for a lot of, not just the musicians, but promoters and, teachers. And like, it's not a stable, but I mean, you don't go into it because it's stable.
I think I want to sort of follow two trains of thought. First is, I imagine you were talking about a stereotype, but a really well-trod path that a lot of musicians have to take, right? Where you're doing waitressing or you're doing other jobs on the side. Was there ever a moment where you thought, gee, I got to stick with, whatever the side job was, or I've got to, pull off the path here?
Honestly, I can say no, there wasn't, but I know other musicians around me, not in my particular little orbit, because we were actually, we were kind of on a really good path, but it was the other musicians that I knew that had come out of the conservatory at the same time with me, or just not even the conservatory, just even musicians that I met who were working really hard to try to keep it so that they could keep doing their music. We're like, this isn't sustainable. Like I'm not paying the rent. I don't know if I want to live like this for the rest of my life. It's too risky. There's no security, and there really isn't. It really is a life of like every day is going to be different, which is part of the appeal for some of us. But I had a lot of friends that completely changed careers. Like one, and a couple of them, like it was so like gut wrenching because they were really good friends of mine and they were supreme musicians, like some of the best musicians I knew. And like one guy decided that he was just going to give it up and like become a meteorologist. And I was just like, that's just crazy. Like I couldn't get my head around it. I was like, but I supported the decision because I understood. I was in the middle of understanding how hard it was, but for some reason there was I wasn't prepared really I wasn't prepared to not let it happen, however it happened. You could ask me or you could ask any musician at any point in their lives that same question, and the stories. Like I'm not telling you some horror stories. Like there were times where we're like, oh my God, we show up at a gig and like nobody was there. We're like, well, this totally isn't going to pay the rent. What do we do? Well, let's just keep going and see what happens. And I think you do have to have a bit of that, like, resilience and fearlessness. Is that the right word? And be willing to, guys, we have to pool all of our money together this month to save so-and-so from getting evicted.
Yeah. Let's talk about the, the gig where you show up and nobody's there for a minute. It feels like now in the 21st century that so much revolves around praise maybe, or just like public affirmation, right? We're looking at likes, we're looking at followers, we're looking at all this data about who's out there watching and listening. How have you sensed a change in either your own way of looking at performance or the way that your students do because of that? Has that changed the way people are relating to their art?
Absolutely. I 100%. I think, I guess we're talking about like the internet here, really. Ultimately, like we're talking about the internet and the advent of the internet. I know, like, so when I was a teenager and, my early career as a musician, that it didn't exist. So we didn't have social media. We didn't have Facebook. We didn't have Instagram. You didn't have to have an artist page. Sometimes even now, I don't even know what that really means unless you're, I don't know, the Rolling Stones, I know that it helps. I'm kind of a little bit phobic of social media. So maybe I'm not the right person to be asking anyway about that. It makes me anxious. And I do think there have been like really amazing benefits. So you have access to so much more. Young students, young musicians oh my God, they can have a master class every night at home just by going on and checking out YouTube. They can watch like Itzhak Perlman playing like, a Bach partita over and over and over and over again, and like really get something out of it. Or any other million examples like that. We kind of had to seek it out, like old school, like read about it or go into the listening library, and we were listening to vinyl records. And but as far as how it's changed audience participation or getting people out to gigs or how people hear about gigs, I still think there is a real human need for word of mouth. Word of mouth, honestly, still feels so organic to all of us. I don't care how comfortable you are with the internet or how much you're loving Facebook or all this, like still like talking to somebody about even, did you get tickets to so-and-so, or are you going, or did you hear about it? Yeah, maybe then you have to go on the internet and get tickets, but hearing or talking about the arts and music with people in real time is exactly the same feeling that you get about like, sitting at a show or talking about the show right after the show. It's done other things. It's made people more anxious and self-conscious. And so if you're already like worried about being good enough, you should not be putting your stuff up on Facebook and, freaking yourself out about it. 'Cause that's a whole other part of the psychology of like social media. Like it's a head wrecker.
Mm-hmm. That's where I thought you were going to go with that. So yeah, I was just wondering if maybe you see in your students, maybe the feeling or like a multiplied feeling of how you might have felt when you show up at a gig and nobody's there, if they have like a low number of like followers on Facebook or whatever, or if they're verbalizing like, oh, I don't know how many people have listened to my, digital album.
Yes. Or I only got like 5 hits on, Spotify or 5 downloads or 5 streams, 5. The language is different. The language is different because it's a new medium, it's a new platform, but the feelings, I don't know though. Yeah, the feelings are the same. So it's the same sort of feeling of like, I'm not good enough, or, oh my God, why didn't anyone come to our show? I'm exaggerating. Like, I don't think Solas ever went to a show. We might have gone and there was low numbers and we weren't happy with that, but it was never like completely empty. But it's still that feeling of like, human feelings. I hope anyway. I everything's happening so fast these days. I do see some change in like young people's the way they're reacting to and what it does to them, social media, like not getting enough likes on a video hit or on a video that they put up of themselves playing, or, I think it can be dangerous because it's not real. It's right. It's not real. Like it's this place that you can actually disconnect from and go back and practice for 3 more hours, and you're going to feel way better. I know it's real for the younger kids today, though. Like this is like I'm sounding like I'm coming from the older generation, which I am, but I get scared and frightened for my students and younger kids today of what the ultimate effects of the information and the access and the social media and all of this stuff is doing to their feelings and their emotional connection, and how we're not prepared to evolve. I don't think as fast as everything is happening. And is that affecting creativity? Probably. But I don't know if we're going to know that yet for a long time, Seems to me like kids are out there, like the level of playing and the level of musicianship is just like through the roof. And I think that is because they have access to the internet and they're looking and listening and they're like sponges. So it's great for that. But like anything, I think you have to use it, wisely. And
Mm-hmm.
we're not always so wise when we're 17, 18, 19, 20. We can get sucked into things that aren't good for us. And I do know that from many like experiences, like being at festivals or camps, there's nothing like sitting around like outside at night playing tunes. Nothing. And I don't care what generation you're from. I don't care if you're 85 years old or if you're 15. That feeling is the same for the 85-year-old as it is for the 15-year-old. There's something that we humans understand about that, and we know that it feels right.
Right.
And we don't want to lose that, right? We don't want to lose that. And that's the other thing I was talking about, the whole COVID situation with Zoom and having to feel something through a machine. It just felt so bizarre and so weird,
Yeah. I don't think there's a number of likes on Facebook that can equate to the feeling that you get when you're present with somebody who's
Absolutely.
really like in tune with what you're doing.
Absolutely. Absolutely 100%, and I can say possibly this. Here's maybe a good little example. If you're playing live to 10 people in an audience, if there's only 10 people there, I know this. If you're really true and passionate about what you're doing, you're going to play just as well and just as, I hope, like with as much passion and with as much care as you would if you were playing to 150,000 people on the internet streaming a show.
Mm-hmm.
And in some ways, to me, the experience of playing to those 10 is way more, those 10 people live is way more challenging, but way more satisfying and way more of a connection. It just makes sense, doesn't it? I mean, humans, we need that. Like, I think it's the reason why music exists, really. Not to get too philosophical about it, but it kind of makes sense.
It does make sense. But do you think you can put your finger on what it is about it? Like as a musician, as somebody who does perform in front of people, do you know what it is that makes that connection so special?
Oh, I think it's being able to communicate without saying anything, like without actually words or without verbalizing or without like outright like action or emotion or visible, like there's this communication that happens that you really can't describe because it's happening. So say like a musician is in their bedroom practicing by themselves. That feeling happens to them, but it changes when you put one other person in the room with them because you're sharing something then. Do you know what I mean? So then you put 3, 4 more, 5, 10, 15, 20, 30, 50, 70 more people into the room. Then I'm from the stage sharing it with you. I'm getting something back from you. You're sharing something with me from the audience. And then the other 200 people in the room are also doing that with each other or doing that with the band or, there's this weird, like, beautifully indescribable communication that's happening. So yeah, I think it's just magic. Like, I think it's kind of magic. Yeah, it definitely is magic because we all try to describe it. Like, how do you feel like when you put on one of your favorite bands or favorite albums, or you hear one of your favorite songs from like when you were growing up?
Right. It transports you.
Really, yes.
Mm-hmm. Oh yeah. I was just gonna say it transports you, right? And I think that when you're all together, right, even more so than when it's a record, maybe you're being transported someplace together.
Absolutely.
But certainly, But certainly it's an experience that changes you. And I don't necessarily mean because sounds kind of schlocky, I guess, but I don't mean in like necessarily the most profound and earth-shattering way, but it changes you even in small ways just to have, the needle hit the record.
Absolutely. Yes. Yes, yes, yes. And I think that word transport is perfect because we really don't know where it takes us. We can't describe that either. It takes us to a place that's like it's like it's in our soul, and we don't know what that is. I mean, we know it's there, but we don't know what it is. And I just think, yeah, it transports all of us. Like if you're able to experience it together in a venue or in a church or around a campfire or on the beach at night, wherever you can play a few tunes or sing some songs or go listen to someone like read poetry, it's all about like that human connection and being taken someplace else that's not where we are right now, which sometimes isn't the nicest place to be.
Right.
It's also escapism, that's I love talking about this stuff because it just, I don't know. I do. I just think it feels so beautiful to be able to understand that like we're not lost yet.
Right.
Like we are not lost yet. Like we still have the ability and the capabilities to get it right and reconnect and even if only some of us do.
Mm-hmm.
Or I mean, exactly. It would be great if like most of us did. I do think that in general most of us do. So there's still hope. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think when you were talking before about tentative steps right after COVID, and what's the music world going to be like post COVID, I wonder, well, maybe I don't wonder, I hope that what you're saying, that sort of deep longing in people for that kind of connection is going to carry us through, right? Because I agree with you. I don't think we've lost it. And I think that maybe there will be sort of an unleashing of desire for people to have that connection again, to have that in their lives.
Absolutely. I hope so. I hope that is the like collective shift that might have happened while we were all like suffering and like upset and worried and frightened and disconnected and like, oh my God, what's happening to this place that we're all stuck on together? Like things weren't great before COVID, but it certainly
Right.
It certainly gave us an opportunity to really think about what's important and what's really meaningful. Like, and I hope that most of us got it, or at least thought about it, because there's a huge power in like collective thought and collective like hope, right? And I think that's also part of like being able to deliver a really beautiful night of music, is that it gives the audience, not just the audience, it gives the performers as well a sense of hope and like, connection again, hope and connection and whatever the artist and the band is trying to communicate. It's going to be different for each person in the audience too. That. Like everyone's not hearing it the same way, which is also beautiful. Like someone might hear like a really sad piece and it might not stir what I consider to be sad when I'm playing, might not be sad. Someone might not be thinking about something sad. They might be thinking about something really brave or beautiful or, powerful, as opposed to like sad and depressed, which sometimes kind of helps your music, believe it or not, but it's all emotion,
Yeah. Oh yeah, I agree with that. Because I think even like if you were to go into all of our own like personal playlists, right, or the albums that we turn to when we really need music, I think some people turn to music that's going to like really pick them up and just like boom, 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 like relentlessly happy sounding. And then for other people, they want the catharsis of the thing that sounds to them, like wrenching and like soul stirring.
Absolutely. Because it almost validates, for me, it almost validates the feeling that I'm having before I put that sort of soul stirring, tugging at your heartstrings track on. It validates it. It's like, because we as humans, we're always questioning, well, I am anyway, but we're always questioning our emotions. Like, oh my God, am I overreacting? Am I good enough? Or, does he love me? Or, do I really love him? Or, are my neighbors talking about blah, 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 all this stuff. And so you can put on a track and like, it can either lift you out of that or it can validate some of those feelings, the world is falling apart. So I'm going to put on a track that's actually like going to be the soundtrack to that little mood I'm in. But, honestly, 10 hours later, I'm going to put on like a Rolling Stones track and lift myself out of it. Or, I don't know why I'm always like saying the Rolling Stones. I was kind of on a bit of a Rolling Stones jaunt for the last while. I don't know why.
That's great. I'm a big Stones fan too. And
me too. Yeah.
That's good. And it's great that we're talking about this on our station because we have a few other volunteer DJs who are really huge into the Beatles and they feel like it's either Team Beatles or Team Stones. And I don't feel that way. I think you can like them both.
I do not. I am with you. I do not feel that way at all. And I've always wondered about that, Team Beatles, Team Rolling Stones. And initially, when I remember being posed that question, I was way younger, and my immediate answer was the Rolling Stones because I just felt like they were so much more rebellious, and that's where I was at that point in my life. But like, oh my God, there's no such thing as you have to love one more than the other. I absolutely adore and love the Beatles, and they're icons. They're different. But the Stones are like icons and amazing as well. Like, and they're different, and that's what it's about. Right. Like, who would want the two bands to sound the same? Then you have two bands that sound like the Beatles. It's ridiculous to me. I mean, you need to have the Beatles and you need to have the Stones to be able to appreciate.
Yes.
So that the Beatles lovers can love the Beatles as much as they want to because maybe they hate the Stones so much, So they both need to exist.
Yep.
Yeah.
I was going to say, what I think is so great about this part of the conversation too is here you are, somebody who's played, trad and Celtic music and toured the world playing that music. And we're having a conversation about your passion for the Rolling Stones too. And I think that in some ways that breaks down sort of those artificial barriers that sometimes people put up when they say, well, I am a rock and roll person or I am a trad person. And I wonder if you have any thoughts about that too.
Oh, don't get me started. I am so ready to talk about that. Like, I think, first off, I think labels are just ridiculous. We need them at the grocery store, but we don't need them like in our music life or our arts life or our, creative life or, we really don't. I mean, what are you doing to yourself if you put a label on yourself of what you are? Like you are just limiting and cutting off so much of what else is out there. Like you're doing yourself such a disservice, right? And but then what irks me even more is that the belief that you can only be one thing, or that you can only love one thing. Like, it doesn't make any sense to me. It's like, it was just the example I used about the Beatles and the Stones. It's like, one has to exist. They both have to exist to love one or the other as much as we Team Stones or Team Beatles, whatever you want. I just think it's ridiculous. I think I would never. I encourage my students. I'd say first off, there's no such thing as right or wrong in music or the arts. There just isn't, and that's the beauty of it. Like there's no such thing. there's so much freedom in it. And so why would you limit that? Why would you put like yourself in a box of like, I'm only this, or I'm only going to listen to this, or, you're not this enough. What is that? What does that even mean? I mean, if you're not trad enough, or you sound too classical, or your blues aren't bluesy enough, or your slide steel isn't slide steely enough, or what who are these people that are saying this? Because I don't know. When I hear it, it all sounds like what it's supposed to sound like. And if it was all the same, we would be so disappointed, and our lives would just be gray. Like our musical palette would just be gray, So yeah, I have a huge problem with like labels and putting things in boxes, and of course things are genre specific. I mean, but that was also like genre. That was a term that was like created by the industry to like be able, when record stores existed, so you could go in there and where's the heavy metal section, or where's the Celtic section, or where's the folk music section, or yeah, of course, like there's differences and they sound different, and but I don't believe that they exist for any different reasons than what music in general exists for. So the argument is mute to me. Like whatever music you're into is valid. Whatever you're listening to is valid. It's probably all really good. It is all really good.
I agree. I absolutely agree. I think, actually, I'm not sure if it was with Solas or if it was with a different band that you were performing with, but I know that several members of your band had written tunes that had sort of nods or influences from various genres too. And I wonder, A, what that sort of meant to you to be able to do that, and then B, what kind of reaction did you get when you were touring and you would be, walking on stage with a fiddle, and then all of a sudden playing something that sounds, more like a rock song or more like a country song, for example?
Yeah, that's a really good question, because it happened quite a bit actually. And number one, it didn't bother us because our intention was not to like ruffle feathers. Our intention was just to make good music and make true music true to ourselves, right? And so yeah, the Solas in particular, over the years, but when we first started, like everyone came from such eclectic backgrounds, like I had a really strong classical background, so that was, I'm not gonna say that was my forte in the band, but like that sound exists on like some of the tracks where we added string parts, or string arrangements, or string pads, things like that. Or say John Doyle, the original guitarist, like I mean he's just insane. Like he's a rock and roll fan, and so like his guitar playing reflected his background and all the music that he listened to. Seamus Egan listened to everything under the sun growing up, raised in Ireland, like champion on like all traditional instruments, but like was really into like indie music, really into classical music, really into jazz, like, Karen Casey, the initial singer, really into Billie Holiday, really into, I don't know, you name it. Like, and so it would feel weird if we stifled that part of our musical identity, what shaped us, what formed us. I'm not just talking about Solas now. I'm talking about any musician out there that has been shaped by what they've listened to or what they love, God, like if I would almost go as far to say is that you'd be lying to yourself if you didn't let that come out of you, or it would feel really restricted or something. So again, I don't know if it's ever a conscious choice. it wasn't with us. Like it was never a conscious choice to write a certain way, or, we would take like maybe a Bob Dylan song and try to treat it with maybe. You don't want to take a Bob Dylan song. You can't make it sound like Bob Dylan. He already did it. It was like amazing already.
Mm-hmm.
Like, it's like the best. Like, so what are you going to do? Because you love Bob Dylan, you're going to take a Bob Dylan song and try to do your best and try to put it in a different place, with respect, of course, and not like always with respect and with taste and with, that's also that's a whole other thing of like, you need to have taste barometers or something. And I don't think you can have those if you're not well-rounded, or if you haven't listened to a ton of different stuff. If you restrict yourself to listening to only one type of thing, then yeah, be happy and stay there. But don't criticize others that have stepped outside and sought other sounds or other other musics even, Mm-hmm. I used to think it was quite what's the word when you oh no, it's not the right word. Not worldly, when when you're not isolationist, when you like being an
Mm-hmm.
isolationist or something. That's not the right word I was looking for, but it'll do. And that doesn't feel right as a citizen of the world or as a musician of the world. So yeah, you don't want to. You can do that, but I'm not gonna. If that's how you want to do it, I'm not gonna. I'm not gonna tear you to bits if you choose to do that. So, don't tear me and my friends to bits if we choose to like go out in the world and see what's happening.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
That actually brings us, I think, back to the show on Peaks, which is going to be really kicking off in some ways a weekend of a celebration of community out on the alley, because it's occurring on what we call Peaks Fest, and there's going to be a lot of different community events. Yeah. Hopefully you'll be able to stick around for that. I'm not sure if you're planning on it, but
I would love to. We're actually playing that night, and then we have to take off the next morning. Like we're playing a festival the next day. But Ellen was telling me that Peaks Fest is happening that weekend. So hopefully it'll be a great weekend for you guys. I hope the weather holds up and all that.
Yes. Oh gosh. Yeah. Us too. Usually June is very nice out here, so fingers crossed.
Yeah. Our gig, our show is at the New Bracket Church. Mm-hmm. So we'll be indoors anyway. And from what I've heard, I haven't actually been in the church, but Ellen was telling me it's really nice. There's a real piano in there.
Yes.
Mm-hmm. And honestly, I hope you can come to the show, Chris. Like, Utsaf Lal is probably one of the most beautiful musicians I have ever heard in my life. And I consider myself like supremely lucky to be playing with him. He was one of my students at the conservatory. He was a master's student there, and we ended up just playing together. And so we've been playing together for now about 6 years, and he's coming. He's playing that show. And then John Williams, who's the original accordionist from Solas. So, like, I know John for like 30 years.
That's great.
It's so exciting. And it's kind of the world and the universe works in such mysterious ways. But so he's playing in this new quartet. And then Katie Grennan is playing fiddle. So there's actually two fiddles, which is really different for me. Because Solas was always just only one fiddle. I'm loving it. It's so much fun to have each other to play off of, and like, so I can play the melody and Katie will play a harmony, or vice versa. It was really frustrating just only getting to play the melody, and in your head there's like all these harmonies swimming around. So it's kind of like we have a little string section going on. I'm really excited to share some new music. We're in the middle of making a new CD, and we're kind of happy with the way things are going. I'll send you some tracks. So I'll send you some new tracks. You. They're not mixed though. That's the only thing. So yeah, I'm kind of bold, rebellious, sending them out into the world without being mixed, but it's okay.
I'm sure
If
it'll sound
it'll,
great.
if people on Peaks can hear it, maybe they'll like it enough to come out to the show.
Right, exactly. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I was hoping that you could give us a sense of the style or the sound, because we've been talking about a lot of eclectic styles. What do you think the sound is like that people can expect?
Oh, oh man, it's beautiful. Like Utsoff Lal, the pianist, he is Indian, and he grew up. He's from New Delhi, but he grew up in England and Ireland actually, and he studied Indian classical music. He's just an amazing player. Indian raga music is his specialty, but he's also one of the most beautiful just jazz, uh, Celtic. He can play anything. He can play anything. This guy is just amazing. So his addition to the quartet just kind of makes it like, I don't know. I can't really put a feel on, or what to call it. He just provides such a beautiful bed of sounds for what the three of us are doing on top, which is mostly Irish. We're doing some French waltzes too, though. I'm a huge fan of French music, French accordion music to be really specific. Like I just love that whole like Parisian sort of cafe music. So we're doing a few things like that. Some beautiful old Irish airs, and yeah, it's just gonna be a lovely night. I again, I really can't put it into like one box, musically. It kind of seeps out a little bit across a couple of different genres.
That
Yeah,
sounds
that's
great.
it,
That's very
really.
fitting in a sort of long-term sense for Maine and for New England, because of that mix of French style, Irish style. There's
Yeah.
certainly a blend like that. That's very familiar up here.
Yes, absolutely. A lot of that up there, and I do think it'll be, I do think it'll resonate, and I know that people are going to be really. I know just from playing with Utsoff, and I keep singing his praises because they must be sung. Like, I know this from playing with him in public at performances before the COVID lockdown. We were doing some touring together, and just his playing is just stunning. It's otherworldly, like it. So I'm really wanting people to come out and hear him. I mean us too, but he's just a really special force. Like, yeah, he's a beautiful sort of. I can't describe his musical soul. It's just beautiful. So yeah,
That is
I'd
great
love
to hear.
people to come out and. Yeah, good. I really hope to meet you up there and see you at the show.
Yeah, I sure hope so too. I think we'll be able to. I think we'll be able to stop by, which
Oh,
would be great.
good. Oh, good. Good, good, good. Yeah, it's at what is it? It's at 8 p.m. at the New Bracket Church.
Mhm.
I think Ellen will be happy that I remembered that and said that on the show.
Yes, yeah.
Yeah.
That's great. So I think I'd like to close with something that a person had sent to me when I was a teenager, and it stuck with me my whole life. And I want to get your take on it because I kept thinking about it and listening to you talk about music.
Hmm.
He had said to me to really find something that made me the most me that I could be, and that should be like everyone's mission in life. And I want to know if that's how you feel about your music career and music in your life.
Yes, is the answer to that. I don't even need to think about it. It is definitely like probably when your friend said that to you, didn't it kind of feel really comfortable and safe, and like didn't it make sense? Like and it just like you said, it just doesn't go to music. Like it's like you should be your most authentic self. I mean, that's what we're all striving to be in life anyway, regardless of what you're doing. And it makes the most beautiful music. It makes the most beautiful art. It makes the most beautiful boats. When I think of what my father did, like building wooden boats, and his carpentry, and no matter what you're doing, you're drawing, you're taking photos, you're whatever you're doing, like you've got to be your most. How did your friend say it to you? Be
To be the most you that you can be.
Be the most you that you can be. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
That's, I think, all I've ever really tried to do at different points in my life without really knowing who I might have been yet or who I was yet. But it was helping me find that. Does that make sense? Like it was like moving kind of parallel, like, who am I? Like, well, this feels really good. This is like music. And then like, how do I get me into my music? Well, it's me anyway, because it's me playing, right? That's right there. That's pretty easy to see and figure out. But what am I injecting into it that's like coming from my true authentic self? Is it my rebelliousness? Is it my anti-establishment vibe? Is it my desire that like, and hope that like the longing for like world peace is not like just this thing that's, only a dream, like, or like, this whole idea that like life doesn't have to be like this, everybody. If everyone would just sit down and chill out and like, let's just be kinder to each other. And, it sounds really cheesy, but like, I want that to come through in my music. I want people to feel that it's okay not to know who you are. It's also really kind of cool to know who you are, and be confident about that. You're lucky if that's you, if you feel confident about it, Here's one, and this might help, is like, I only realized in the last maybe 5 or 6 years that vulnerability is probably the key to expression in music. Like for me anyway, a dancer might say the same thing, or I'm talking about like what I physically do with the violin, right? I only began recently in my life to accept the fact that it was my sort of vulnerability that was what was kind of helping me to say something. And it didn't make sense, because it was like when you're vulnerable, you usually kind of hold back and you don't really say any, you say stuff, but you're not 100% confident or something. So I think that there's a really, I think that's part of the message too that the audience gets, and that makes them feel better and comfortable, is that, holy moly, like she's not really sure of herself, or she's feeling vulnerable, and that's coming across, and that's making me feel okay about my stuff. That's one example, like, and vulnerability is just one part of it. Like, the word rebellious is also a big part of my process too. It's great to have a way to get that out, without getting arrested. Yeah.
Right.
Without getting arrested these days. Yeah. Anyway, so that's kind of where I'm at.
That's
right
great.
now.
Well, I've very thoroughly enjoyed this conversation with you.
Oh, Chris, thank you. Me too. Definitely. It feels good. It feels good to talk, doesn't it? And,
it sure does.
And meet new people. It's a pleasure. It's really nice to meet you, and I hope we get to see you up on the island for sure.
For more information on the show, check out the episode page at peaksoundradio.com/Horan. That's HORAN. For more stimulating conversations, check out the archives at peaksoundradio.com or subscribe in your podcast app of choice. I'm going to leave you this week with a track from the Winifred Horan Quartet. Listening to it, you'll get a good sense of the type of music in store for the 17th.